Okay, it looks like I've got some videos, so I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Of course, this is BIS 4403, Data Administration, and we've come down to the end of all of these chapters. We've looked at and used SQL, and then uh, really we've looked at three types of code. We've looked at SQL or structured query language. We've looked at, I'm old school, I call it SQL. Then we looked at uh, the we've looked at the Access version of it, and then we've also looked at the Oracle version of it. And we've seen some of the nuances. We've seen the dash top and some of the graphic user interface they use in Oracle, etc. So what I'm going to do here is we're going to finish this off by looking at Chapter 18. Now, our last foray with SQL, was over in chapter 17 and 16, where we were working with tables, and really chapters 15, 16, and 17 are where we turn a database, where we truly design or build what we call a production database, and we saw that last week as we worked particularly with 17, where we saw that we can use an alias for a field, we can use an alias for a table, we can do inner joins, outer joins, full joins. We did unions, we did union all of these different ways that we can collect data and extract information from it. And ultimately, all these technologies are designed to help us do that. All information technology is what we call this. If it works, if it's handled properly, if we have the right person and we have the right technology, okay, and we have the right data, we have data, we have information for decision making. And so we're down here to chapter 18, and we're going to look at it today. This is a pre-recording, of course, as you know, and I thought it would only be fitting to do it here in the evening. So it's Wednesday evening, the 18th, I believe. Yep. And we're going to look at chapter 18. Now, chapter 18 deals with if, then, else logic. In other words, Boolean logic. It looks at parameter queries, and this is where we establish a parameter or some value or some required input for a subquery, for a query to execute. Then we're going to look at a very powerful tool, the subquery, where we can nest a query inside of a query. Just like we can use a nested conditional statement, we can nest queries, and we're going to see that. And then we'll see some of the applications of them and some of the older features. But it should become readily apparent to you, and particularly as we went through chapters 16 and 17, that we go through a whole progression. And we've come now where the authors would have us do step 1, and then step 2, step 3, and what we were doing is we were extracting data and on a finer and finer cut till we had what we needed or what we wanted. And as I said before, data is like a natural element, like gold, like coal, aluminum. It's extractive, and it has to be extracted, and it has to be refined, and then it can be put to use. And if you think about if you think about coal for a moment, we have to get coal out of the earth, and then we have to refine it, and then we use it to create energy. Metal, aluminum, for example, is another. So this is something that has been noticed by people who've worked with information technology, who've worked with data, this naturalistic property. And this is going to sound a little strange. I'm going to talk to you for a moment about that. When we come down to it, all life forms, everything that's alive, well, everything that exists is at its core, it's binary. It's either alive or it's not. It's either operating or it's not. And that's within the physical and the human realm. And it's the same thing for information. It's stored somewhere, it's kept somewhere, and it may hold some keys or some insights for us. Think for a moment about DNA. Now, we have been fortunate enough to live in an era where we understand about the genetic code, we understand about DNA, we understand about those sequences, and those have unlocked enormous insights into human beings in terms of their physicality. And so we're able to understand things about our lives and our behavior and how we interact with the physical world and how we operate as an animal creature, if you will. But we, of course, as the Bible tells us, we have a soul, we have a heart, we have that essence that takes us beyond just a biological thing. And all you have to do, if you to see that, even if you're not a Christian, would be to look around the world and see how people, all cultures do two things. One, they memorialize lives. They do it by, we find places where people who, we find tombs. These are way before it, when we had what we thought maybe would be the first civilizations. We found tombs. We find pictures of it looks like pictures that people. And of course, the cave in France is probably the most significant. And also, we find where people have learned to count things, that people have a sense of right. Now, I'm far afield, okay? And so when I tell you that we have yet to really truly understand what the kinds of things that information technology can unlock for us, I've got to tell you that we really don't. If you were to take, for example, all of the ways that we use computers now, and computer technology and information technology and databases, to look at and to explore, say, fragments of the Bible, you'd understand then that this is an enormously powerful tool. And when we can gather and collect it and analyze that data so quickly, okay, then it really changes everything for us. And this last chapter, in some ways, this is going to sound strange, is kind of a celebration of that piece, in which we take a database and we take the idea of a query, and we take the idea of parameters and the idea of conditional statements, and we apply them to the database. You've heard me say it before, and I'll say it again. And of course, if you look down at page 714, okay, if you go over to the key points for the chapter, page 674, as they talk about the older features of subqueries, you're going to see correlated subqueries. And you're going to see subqueries using the exists, okay? When we build tables and save them, we literally put them in a machine. Now, we can take those same tables and we can put them out on the cloud. When we talk about putting stuff in the cloud, ultimately, there is a physical presence of the data. They're out on servers in these enormous server farms. And that's why when we run a query, we've said we run a view. But ultimately, we're talking about linking two things that have a physical existence of some kind. They correlate. They share they both have an address. They have an address that has a pointer or a link from one to the other. This is really no different than if you were to, this would be no different if we were to sit down with you. If this show this guy Henry Gates is on, where he traces people's ancestry and who is their father. And you notice they use DNA. And then they come back at the end with this chart that shows you this percentage of this or that. Things are all linked together. And in terms of information, it's the same way. And the idea of correlated data that are physically linked, is really at the heart of the databases and really at the heart of data administration, because when things are linked, we have a trail and we can follow that trail. And the question then becomes is, how many servers are we going to need to continue to do the processing we want? Well, it's really going to depend a lot on how fast we can move data. It's going to depend on the size of network capacities. And most of all, it's going to depend on how well we continue to develop machine-human interface, program applications and interfaces with machine language to get what we're after. Now, I've shared with you something that this is the stuff that folks who are computer scientists think about all day long. But you should understand that here out in business, we are going to live or die with ramifications of that technology. And so better to take advantage of the tools and use them, okay, than to simply just pretend they don't exist or they don't work well. One of the great paradoxes that exists is what is known as the productivity paradox, and that is the assumption that that is the reality that the better the technology we have. You probably may have heard of Moore's law, and that is that the speed of computing grows at an exponential pace every 3 years or something like this. And then people say, okay, but what's the problem? Ultimately, the problem is the human imagination, a human being's knowledge of a business. When you're running a business, think of what the word means. It's called busyness. I'm busy doing something. What is the something I'm doing? It could be painting houses. It could be making meals. It could be flying airplanes all over the world. And we saw in the news, as you recall, there's this. It's all out there in the news about this plane from Southwest Airlines, and the engine blew up. How did they get back? That an airplane, other than a nuclear submarine, or other than the space shuttle or the International Space Station, is the ultimate expression of human beings' ability to make things, especially machines. And here's this machine with hundreds of millions of hundreds of millions of it's really 50, maybe 50, 80, 100 million. The ability to process information that fast. Okay, but it took a human being in the cockpit, an experienced human being, to bring that flight in. And if the lady flying that airplane had not been a combat pilot, if she had not been trained as a military aviator to deal with a wounded or disabled airplane, the people on that plane would be dead tonight. But because she understood and was trained to deal with that piece of machinery in that way, and to deal with a piece of machinery just as complex as that. When you're flying F-18s like she was, you learn, you're taught what do I do if I lose an engine? What do I do if my landing gears stick? What do I do if I send a missile and the missile doesn't drop? What do I do? And they're trained for this. So she was trained for that scenario. And she responded as she did, because the one thing that everybody wants or looks for in people who are aviators, especially aviators, whether they're flying Apache or you're flying Apache helicopters or you're flying stealth bombers, is the ability to control your emotions, the ability to think clearly, and to walk through all the different contingencies that you have to do, that you have to walk through. And so, and it's the same with a database. You can have the most powerful database in the world, but if you don't exercise good judgment, you're in trouble. And right now, as we saw with Facebook, which is other than Google, or probably better, other than Google, Amazon, or Walmart, there's nobody on the planet Earth who can do a database like Facebook. It has everything, but there was not the appropriate judgment taken. There wasn't a judgment that said, this is a powerful thing that can really, if we have something that can unite people, if we have something that can get people to communicate, this is something we need to be careful with. Because Facebook becomes this place where people express themselves. And it's the same with Twitter. It's the same with social media. Are really nothing more than a substitute for the day when people listen to the radio and the families. My father and his family gathering around the radio to be entertained, or I and my family sitting down to TV. Well, today it's what did Trump say on Twitter? How many followers does so-and-so have on Twitter, or who said what on Facebook? And so we this last chapter really starts to helps us think about this journey where I use this database, I use this technology, I use the tool, okay? In a way, I'm got to stop saying okay, it's a bad habit, in a way that makes it useful. So, as I've said before, information technology is at its heart decision-centric. It's designed to help me make decisions. And the technology that we have and that we've developed, we really haven't seen anything yet in terms of what we're going to have. And by the time you're my age, by the time you're out in business, you will see things happening. You'll see businesses created, types of businesses that you never dreamed of. If I had been, when I was in grad school, and information resources and IT was my thing, did I ever foresee a Facebook? If I had ever foreseen a Facebook, I'd be a billionaire too, or the need for social media. And we did understand that there would be a network of networks. There'd be people would link things, want to be able to use that first initial network and expand it to communicate, to share files, to share pictures. Then we began to use it as a tool for decision making. And now, of course, it's all around us. Computing is so ubiquitous, it's so part of our lives, it's almost hard for us to stop and to imagine a world in which anybody, anywhere in the world, can buy a cell phone and suddenly they're connected to planet Earth. This is just something completely unprecedented. And so for you as a business person, you need stop and say, okay, what is the secret sauce for all of this to work? And the secret sauce for all of it to work is a human being who understands the objectives of their enterprise and who wants to use the technology to do two things. One, to make their internal operations the best it can be. Two, to achieve intimacy and ongoing relationship with the key stakeholders of their organization. And in the end, you're going to see changes in these tools that will absolutely astound you and will make you think, wow. When you're my age, your grandkids will make fun of you for carrying a phone around. They're going to laugh at you. To them, you sitting at a desk with a laptop will seem as comical and quaint as us looking at people with green eye shades and a calculator. And that's just because these devices are more and more being embedded into the world around us. Well, I wanted to kind of finish all of this off on somewhat of a philosophical note, because the whole idea of a database, the idea of collecting things, the idea of categorizing them and keeping them in a place is a distinctly human occupation. And if you go back through what we know is recorded history, we know that people tried to find ways to collect and to understand the world around them, to collect data, to collect information. And libraries have been with us, well, since, as far as we know, the early Roman Greco times, the very first semblances of them. When people began to collect, typically it started when people began to collect laws. They wrote them down. Here's the law of Babylon, or here's the law. The Ten Commandments it transformed the Jews, the people of Israel. It transformed them from a nomadic group to a real national group, to people who were no longer just wandering all over the earth. These are people who had a land and they had a code by which to live. And so that's an important thing. But you've got to put that into something to keep it. And your Bible, if you open it up, is really a database. It's been organized. It has books. It has chapters. It has verses. All of that. We grow up with it, but we never really ask ourselves, gee, why is it organized like this? It's simple, so we can find things. So I wanted to share that with you because I really felt like it was important to take all of these technological things and put them into a broader context. And your thought processes in that regard will be the secret sauce, if you will, of your career or of your company, and understanding how to use these technologies. I don't expect you to go out and be database administrators. I don't expect you to be computer or database managers, but I do expect you to understand that a database allows me to collect information, and it can be a very powerful thing as long as I collect the right information at the right time and in the right way. And as we move to using more and more what we call unstructured data, we're going to find newer and newer insights all of the time about how people behave, about their likes, about their dislikes. And that's going to pose an enormous challenge for us. And we're already seeing this in terms of privacy. the people, Congress calling Mark Zuckerberg into into hearings and giving him questions. This is nothing new. This happened to Bill Gates. This happened to people early in the airline industry. This happened to people like Vanderbilt and Rockefeller when they began to build the railroads, when they began the petroleum industry. Government reacting to these new technologies, not knowing what to do with them, but knowing they needed to regulate them. And so we're at that state, we're at that same stage now. And then ultimately, if we can store a database, if we can store information, and if we can get information to mimic actions, then we have a thing called a robot. We have a thing that can that can appear to be autonomous in its decision making, but in truth is really just simply reacting to its environment in a way that it's been trained to react. And that ultimately is what a robot is. People have all these fears that we're going to make robots that will eventually take us over. That's just not going to happen. It's just not going to, because into every robot is programmed error because it's being programmed by humans, and human beings make mistakes. And so robots may be very powerful, but they're not, and will never have something that will have an infinite capacity to respond to new and unexpected stimuli. We just won't. And there will always be that person who's running who's piloting the airplane. There's that part. When we send a probe off to Mars, or we send a probe off out of the solar system, look, there's a human being that put it there. It didn't just take off by itself. It didn't fly by Saturn to go in the rings. It didn't make that decision. It didn't say, wow, this is interesting. It was out there and it collected information for us. And these robots that we collect, that we're building today, that do fantastic things, and if you can go on the internet and see them, are, for all intents and purposes, they're just machines. They're not autonomous. The movies have made so much of this. The Matrix was really the first movie. There's a television show, I think now, called Westworld, which is made after a movie where people go into this simulated world and they live out their fantasies. The Star Trek had this, and I think Star Trek: The Next Generation, or maybe both of them, had this room where you could go in and you could go back to the 1800s or whatever. And if you read all of science fiction, any science fiction involving machines and robots and automation, ultimately, the downfall of any of those systems is when they encounter new and unexpected phenomena, and then they don't know what to do. Then all of the programming doesn't work because they're not programmed. They're not programmed to handle that. So I wanted to talk about it because this is, for many of you, will be the last of these courses that you take, and I hope that we send you out thinking in very broad terms about this, about what we're doing. And so as we walk through the mechanics of these different, of conditional statements and subqueries, and as we've moved from, I can join 10,000 tables and I can take 1 million records, and I can filter it down to 25 records that I need to know, that I need. There has to be a human being who controls that process, who knows what to ask, who knows what type of information to gather. And we're a long way from a point where we'll be replaced. It just isn't going to happen, because human beings are the greatest creation God ever created. Human beings have a soul. Human beings have something that no machine anywhere will ever have, and that's called an imagination. And that imagination, the ability to wonder is what got us in trouble and what makes us divinely different. When we imagine what would it be like to live without full fellowship with God, that got us in trouble. That got us in trouble. And by the same token, when the Lord wraps everything up and when we go off and be with him, all of eternity will be this process of discovery about who he is and his nature. And we'll never come to the end of it because we can't. That's why God is who he is. He's unfathomable and we can't understand it. So I wanted to hopefully to put this course into a broader context, because this really is the last lecture period that we have. And the last time we're going to look at this thing that we call data administration. And that is, how do I handle data and turn it into information for decision making? And how do I use this technology to do it? So let's launch on into chapter 18. We'll look at it some more. And we're introduced in chapter 18 over on page 675 to if-then queries. Now, here's what I would like to do. And before we do that, I want to make sure that we're on top of what's going on. So let's look through the modules, okay? And we'll see where we are and the things that we've got. And we're in that to do, and we're in that part of the chapter. Pardon me, in that section of the course where we are working on projects. We're in that part, which is the hardest part of the course, deceptively easy, where I turn you loose and say, okay, here's some stuff that you need to do, and here's some big projects. And that's what I call the growing up part of our work. And so I'm going to walk through this in terms of what we've got going on as we finish out this course. So I'm going to come over here now. We're at week 11. This is the 19th of April. You have these 3 assignments, which you should have already uploaded. We've already done them. This assignment out of the business intelligence textbook, that's due the 19th. The same with the internet exercise. And then you'll see I have some information here about transactional databases, or what we call production table databases. Most production databases deal with transactions. Somebody bought something, somebody logged in and visited my website, and then online, and then OLAP. The idea of online analytical processing, that when people can go into the network of networks, we can stop and we can do processing, we can do analytical processing. And the data cube, we've talked about that many times. Now, as you come down into week 12, as you scroll down, as we see here, you have the instructions for your check your understanding. And these, we'll open this up for just a second. This is a big project. And you'll see that you have, out of each chapter, a check your understanding exercise. And you'll need to write some code and respond to each of those. Now, you can take, if you wish, the SQL Fund database and work through and run the code and then upload the assignment. And you'll need to label those and so that I know what you did. So you'd have a 241, a 256, etc. And note that I'm telling you the page where you'll find it. And note that when you're there in chapter 2 and you're at page 41, and it gives you a check your understanding, it says, okay, here's something we want you to do. Here's some way we want you to acquire some data and handle and process it. And so that's the check your understanding instructions. And then you'll have a place to upload it. Then we have you have an alternative. Now, if you wish, there's an alternative to check your understanding. Over in your textbook, in the appendices, they walk you through the process of downloading Oracle, a trial version or a baby version of Oracle, which you can use and try out and see how it feels. If you own your own machine and you really want to see what Oracle looks like, because the book's given us some, has given us some pictures and so forth, but if you really want to have that environment and try to work in it, feel free. But you'll have to do it on your machine. And they have a quick start. They have some quick start guides on using it. And I will, I'll be delighted to have several students every semester who say, well, I want to get some experience with that as well. And that's great, because when you go out in the job environment, when the employer says, so you've worked with SAP, which you will have done if you've taken 1123. You've worked with SAS. You'll do that if you've worked with this. You've taken this course, because that's the next is the SAS Visual Analytics project instructions. You've worked with Oracle. You've worked with Microsoft Access. That's going to give you a distinctive that other business students have. That other business students, they don't have. So it's quite important for you to make sure you communicate that to a potential employer. Now, I also have some extra credit instructions, and there's some more. I believe there's some more check your understanding, and of course those are going to be due, and we have the due dates for them. And notice I have flex time for you. So starting on the 26th, I'm not going to be doing a lecture. I might, here's what you'll be seeing. I'll just simply remind you of, here are the big projects going on. Don't forget about this other little stuff you've got to do. And that'll be it. And also you have your final exam. And I have the instructions here for the SAS project. I think you're going to find it, working with SAS and going through it, I think you're going to find it a very, very interesting project. I think you're going to find it to be something that really captures your imagination and helps you understand when I've talked about how we have these tools that are meant to do computation, and that can be gathering data, and then performing operations with data, and then creating a picture of what we find. And then, of course, as we move into the final exam, I have instructions for those about the final exam. In fact, I even have a screencast of the instructions. And I have when our final exam starts and ends. And you'll notice, if you've had, and you always do this, I have a final part of the final exam that's due at the start, and then a part of the final exam that's due at the end of the final exam period. You can work at your own pace, but let me say this, frankly, I doubt seriously that within 2 hours, you will want to try to take these 3 exams. Better that you each of them, if I'm not mistaken, is 40 minutes long. You have 40 minutes. And you might be better off just to kind of chunk it. You said, could I do all of this work before the finals exam period comes? Certainly. I'm going to give you the class time to do it. You have 3 hours a week. And so from this point on, I'm not going to be doing any direct instruction. Your instruction is going to come from the projects that you do. Because as you notice on May 3rd, we've already done these 16, 17. We'll upload an 18 tonight. And so my screencast each week will just simply become a repetitive thing where I go, okay, here's what you got going on this week. But don't forget, you got this project, and then get ready for the final. And we'll talk, and we talk about those in terms of what you've got to do. And so the 150 minutes of lecture time that we've had throughout the course, you're going to be getting it. You're going to be getting it in an indirect way by working on these projects, and then eventually working on the final exam. And those instructions are there. If they're not here, you'll need to go over to the files section in Canvas and use them. Well, let's launch into this chapter 18 and do some work with it. And of course, we always want to go over to the files area. And as I'm using this machine, the same machine over and over, I have SQL fun around here somewhere. There it is. Now I'm going to take this, and this is SQ. This is what I did when I worked on chapter 16. So I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to paste it, and I'm going to rename it. I've got this on my desktop. Now, if you haven't, otherwise, you're going to have to go through the process of going to the zip file, the Patrick Materials, download that zip file, get the SQL Fun database out, then get the file that has the code for each of the chapters. So I'm going to rename this Armin Keith LD 18. Why 18? Well, it's the chapter we're working on. And so I have my database all fired up and ready to go. Next thing I'll do is I'm going to get the access code for that chapter. And this is chapter 18. We'll open it up. Now there's some access and SQL for chapter 19. And while we're there, I want to talk about it for just a moment. Chapter 19 is devoted to work inside of a multi-user environment, and you will be doing that. You'll be working within, well, you already are. And I just believe that it goes a bit beyond what you need. It goes a bit beyond what you really need to be able to do. Unless all of you are going to be business people, you'll be decision makers, you'll have database administrators who will understand how we operate in a multi-user environment. So it's not going to be, it's not too useful for you to go through. If you want to read chapter 9 just for fun, go ahead, okay? But at a certain level, I'm not sure that it's going to do much for you. So we're going to look at chapter 18, and I'm going to take the code out of here, and there it is. So we have the access code, and we'll begin, and the author will give us, and we start over on page 675, and he gives us the if, then, else logic, the most simple of all conditional statements. And if you took 1123 with me, business 1123, you got tired of, we learned all about Boolean algebra, Boolean logic, and it's simple. If this condition exists, then here's what we do. Else, or otherwise, here's the default response. Okay, and so that's good. That's all there is to it. Now, here's a good example of this. After after we had a couple of our ships attacked, and one of them, the USS Cole, blown up, the weapon systems in those the small perimeter weapon systems, that is to fight off a surface attack or to fight or maybe try to destroy a submarine with these destroyers. They call a boat a destroyer for a purpose. It's designed to destroy other boats. Okay, just like an aircraft carrier has a unique name. It carries aircraft. Just like a submarine has a unique name. It's underneath the water. So destroyers are meant to destroy stuff. And so what's happened is those weapon systems have had automation built in them, so that when an unidentified object hits a certain number of hundreds of yards, or I think it's 100 yards now, maybe 100 yards, it sets off, and it will pretty much neutral. It will pretty much vaporize anything around. And I think they're even designed to give a few warning shots. But if an Iranian speedboat keeps coming, that speedboat will not last very long. Now they're smart enough when they get out there to do that. They'll get those speedboats out there in the Gulf of Hormuz and come at the United States vessels, and they know about our systems, and so they come up as close as they can. If they make the mistake of crossing a line, they'll be blown out of the water. And this if then else logic is the same thing. If a certain condition exists, then here's what you do. Otherwise, here's the default. Okay, so we're going to look at this, and here's the Oracle syntax for that function. And then we're over here on page 676 and 677. And he gives us the Oracle code. And we're not going to run the queries, but we're going to do a series of things. We're going to use the decode function. And they talk about that as a section, as from the dual. And that's the 18.1, and they give us that example where we select and we decode the description of a set of columns, and we give it a name as new menu. Then we see them using the case function. And so select the case. This is bottom page 676. Select case with the description equals broccoli, then carrots, else description, and as new menu. And they give us the resulting beginning table and then the results table. The change in the price, the change is based on the data in the description column. And if the description column is broccoli, then we change it to carrots. Otherwise, the value in the description column is not broccoli, so it's kind of equal to a default. So that's some Oracle. And 678 has some more Oracle code with it. Then he begins to move us over into Access. Access uses a different function, and this is called the IFF function. And you'll see over in 18.2 how we use that function. So let's go down to 18.2. This is the access. 18.2 begins the access only code. And there on page 680, he talks a lot about the intermediate if. And the intermediate if says this: we look for a true or false expression. If it's true, here's the value. If it's false, here's the value. And we call it an immediate if because it reacts to either condition. If it's true, here's what you get. If it's false, here's what you get. Now, we're going to look at that for just a minute, and they give us there in 18.2 on page 681. So we're going to use the access code only, and there on 681, we're going to select select the IF, and and then our true or false expression based upon what we find. Now, I'm looking for this to see if they provided us that, and I'm looking to see if he did, and we're supposed to have all the access code here, but it looks like he may not have. So this should be 18.2, but I'm going to go ahead and just write the code in, okay? And then we will. So I'm going to open up a second untitled notepad, and we're going to type, and we'll do it by hand. We'll do select, and then we invoke the intermediate if, and that's two I's and an F, and then a parenthesis, and the intermediate if function, and we're going to put description. And here's the statement of equivalency, equal, and then we put broccoli, and we'll put one single quote, and broccoli, okay, and then that single quote again, a comma, and then we'll put a single quote, and then we'll have carrots, and a single quote, and then a comma, and we'll go to the next line. I'm at the top of page 681, and then we'll write in description, comma, as new menu. And so you notice we've given it a column alias, a new underscore menu. How do I know there's an alias? What's the as? And we'll have a comma, and then we're going to put in. Then we'll put in price, from the L the L underscore foods. Of course, that's that foods table. So check, and I have my notepad up, and you should have your textbook out, page 681, taking a look at. So let's walk through this. And this is 18.2. We're going to select. Okay, we're running a select query, excuse me, and we're using the intermediate if function. And the intermediate if function is the syntax, as they show us the syntax, syntax over on page 680, is true or false expression, the true value, the false value. Now, order is important in 18.2. And what we really are, and what we really have, is we have, let's say we have columns P and columns Q, and we're going to look at we're using some Boolean logic to determine if we get the true value, then if both P and Q are, you remember the truth tables, this is what we're doing. If P and Q are true, then P, the combination P and Q is true. If one of them is false, then it's false. If they're both false, it's false. So we're going to use, and we have that true or false expression. All right, I'm going to take a shot at this. Let's run it and see. Description, broccoli as new value. And we'll take this code and let's see what we could do. And I have a mistake here I found before I even run the code. I want L_foods. All righty, here we go. And I'm going to copy. And I have my database. I should have it open, SQL Fun 18. I'll open it up. And we'll click Enable Content. And I'm going to click Create. Query Design, as the usual thing. And we'll go down to the SQL level. And we're going to put in our language and see if it runs. And it does. Now, we're going to save this as 18.2. And we're going to look at it for just a moment. If you look at the beginning table over on page 681, the foods table, we see that we have a supplier ID, a product code, a menu item. We have the description, the price increase, and then add a new field. So we run this code. Now here's the story. When we find broccoli, it's true. And that true value then becomes carrots. Thus, the false values are evoked, and that's all of the rest of them. And the false value is anything that will not be named, that's not named broccoli. So you see that we have the result table, and you can see we have fresh salad that's still there, didn't change. Soup of the day didn't change. But what's missing? Broccoli. We eliminated broccoli because we exchanged it. And we said if the true value, if we find broccoli, then the new true value is carrots. And we put that in a table with an alias called new menu. This is kind of like an update query, just a little bit easier because we simply say, we're telling the machine, if you go into the foods table, anything you find that's called broccoli, change it to carrots. If it's not named broccoli, leave it alone. And that's really all that we've done. And this is a pretty practical way, if you will, to update a table using the if then else logic. And you can see there on our result table we see the as new menu, that's the field alias that we decide to use. So let's move on. And you said this intermediate if looks fairly cool. It is. Now we're gonna come to the top of page 682, And here's a second way that we do this. We're going to use two intermediate if statements. So let's go over here to our magic board. And I'm going to start with, and this is the top of page 682, select intermediate F description equals broccoli. And then the true value is carrots. And then we have description as new menu, and then comma. And notice what we do here, okay? We're going to do something a little bit different. So I'm going to copy this first part of this query we had run. And so let's stop and think. This is the same first two lines of code. We're going to select the intermediate if. Anywhere we find broccoli, which is the true value, then we call it carrots. If it's not broccoli, i.e. the false value, then we put in the false value, which is what it was if it's not broccoli. And you say, oh, okay, so we've been down that, we've been to that party. And now after new menu, I invoke a second intermediate if statement. And that's intermediate if the if description equal broccoli. And we can basically, I can just code this from here. And then we're going to have a new line of code, 1.20, comma, and here we have a table alias, a.price, and we'll put a parenthesis. As price. And then, of course, from the L Foods, and we can copy that line and put it in here. Let's look at this for just a minute. You see up here what we did. If we say, okay, if it's called broccoli, then we change it to carrots. Anything else, leave it alone. In this second query, we're doing the same thing initially, and we're putting it into a column alias called new menu. But now we use a second intermediate if description, intermediate if function, where we say the description equals broccoli. Then we put 1.20. Okay. And then we invoke a column alias called a.price. We actually have a column, we have a table alias, and we call it a.price, and then we call it as price. Now, at the bottom of page 682, the author explains to you what we did, because so far as we've been going along, when we would use something like a.price, we assumed that we're going to have to identify the table as we get into the from statement. You know, we were doing all those inner joins and outer joins, and we use those. But we've got it embedded inside this intermediate if statement. So then we can override that and make it a column, and we're going to call it the column price, and we're getting all that from the foods. And he tells us there at the bottom of 682 what's going on there. Let's see if we did it right. I'll check mine. Okay, equals broccoli. Okay. And then if it's broccoli, we change it to carrots. And that's in the description as new menu. Okay. And then we include price. Okay, we stop there. And now we use another intermediate if the function description equals broccoli. And we put in 1.20 a dot price. And because we've got it embedded in the intermediate if, we simply are creating a column called price. And we're drawing all of this from the foods table. And so we'll copy this. And we're going to click create. We're going to go to query design. We're going to click close, SQL. And let's run it and see what happens. Oops, I've got a parameter value there. So the column is from clause. Oh, I messed this up. Here it is, my friends. I found the parameter. This should be from foods. Well, I thought we could override that now that we had that. That's my fault. That feature is not working yet in Access. I thought it was. Now, let me show you what I'm talking about here so you understand where I went error. This should be from L_foods A. I thought with having it embedded in that intermediate if function that we could skip that and then use the column. We could override the column alias, but obviously we can't. That's my fault. So we should be able to run this now. And let's just go back here for a minute. I want to get all this out of here. And get the right way. And I'm working on this small, here we go. From L Foods A. All right. I thought we'd be able to override that, but apparently we can't yet. There we go. To reiterate, let's go back here. And we're going to call this one, I'm going to save this as 18-2 example 2. You'll notice as we've moved away from the more simplistic queries that and these past couple of weeks or so, I'm spending a lot more time explaining to you. And the reason is because these queries, although maybe not as lengthy, are becoming more and more complex. And typically what happens with any programming language, the specificity, the syntax becomes more compressed. That's why we use math, because math can communicate stuff that would take us quite a while. If I say 8 plus 4 equals, 8 plus 4 and base 10 equals 12. Here's another way to say it. I have 8 of something, and then I also have 4 of something. Or I have 8 of the same thing and 4 of the same thing. How many things have I got? You see the difference? And here, that's what makes this such elegant code. Is it's so simple. Its simplicity is what makes it so powerful. And so here we use the intermediate if. In fact, we used a pair of them. We used the first to change carrots to broccoli, and then we used the second one to give broccoli to change broccoli to carrots and give it a new price of 120 in the price, and a new column called price, and then we used the A dot price, and we identified L_foods as A. And my apologies about that. I thought we could override it by adding it in there, but obviously not. You learn something every day. Okay, so that's 18.2, example 2. That's over on page 682. Now, the authors take us over to 683, and he talks about attaching messages to rows. And these are, as you recall, we've talked about literals. That is, we provide a red flag or a message into a row. And so this is going to be 18.3, and I want to see if he was merciful and give us an 18.3, or if we get to have the fun of putting it all in there. I think now let's look at this, like description, price. No, he's still got the SQL code there. Well, let's see it. There's a section from dual. Does he give us the dual there for 18.3? And I'm looking for the SQL dual for that, and for 18.3. So we're going to have to, I think, this looks like we're going to have to type this in as well. All right, well, let's try it. All right. We'll come down here. And I'm at the top of page 684, and we're going to type this in. So far, we're going to select description, price, and then on that third line, we're going to invoke an intermediate if. Price is greater than 2.00, so if the price is greater than $2, we're going to hard code it. We're going to put in a literal. We're going to hard code in, and we're going to call it expensive. Single quote, expensive item. It should be expensive item. Then the single quote, then the comma. And then he has us do something different. We're going to put a single quote, make sure it's a single quote, a space, a single quote, and then the parenthesis. And then we'll come to the next line of code, and we'll put as message. Now, you don't have to have that as message flush all the way over. He's just doing this so he can keep it simple for us in terms of the line of code. That's all. And it will be from L_foods. And then we're going to order it. Description. Semicolon. Now, this is the third one. This is going to be 18.3. First, and I'm at the top of page 684, so we're going to walk through and check my work. Select description. Okay. So far, so good. Price. Okay. And then we come to the if-then logic. We use the intermediate if function. If the description equals broccoli, pardon me, if the price is greater than 2.00, comma, then this literal that we've typed in, this message, it will be called expensive item. If not, we're going to have an unknown value, a blank value put in there. Yes, you've heard me complain about null values forever. This one time, here's one of the occasions we're having null values. Okay, and we're going to call that as message, and we're going to get that from the foods table, and we're going to order it by description. Let's see if this works. Now you're getting to have some fun. See me have the joys of writing code. And so we'll click create, query design, and let's run it. And there it is. Look at that. Amazing, isn't it? Now we're going to call this, save this as 18.3. -3. Again, you know, we learned early on, we learned early on about literals, and that's where we put in a flag for each record if some condition within that record exists. And in this case, any item that is more than $2 is called an expensive item. And we use the intermediate if function to determine that. And we see the beginning table there on page 684. We see the ending table. So we've done that piece there. One of the things that you're going to find, and this looks at page 685, is that there's going to be there will be times when we want to divide data from one column and we want to split it into two columns. Now, you may recall this, maybe you don't. If you're working, let's say that you're working in Excel and you've downloaded some data and the data are all in column 1. You can go into text to data, I think is what it's called, and you can find a delimiter which will divide that into two columns. Typically, it's something like somebody will send you a file with last name, first and last name, where you want to tear your hair out because then you can't import it, you can't really use it because it's amalgamating two distinct elements, last name, first name. So you use that text to columns to split that maybe on a space, a column, whatever. And that's what he's showing us over there. And that's that decode function in Oracle. And now, when we put stuff together, we're concatenating. Now he claims to give us an 18.4 access code to do that using debits and credits. And let's see if he actually does that. It uses the case. No, he doesn't. So we're going to get to type that in. Isn't this fun? Trust me, if you ever have to write code, you'll save it because you'll have gone through you'll say, I'm not going through that pain again. But that's okay. We've been lazy and we've been allowed to get away with not writing a whole bunch of code, so this won't kill us. So I'm going to do 18.4 on page 686. 686. And we're going to start with select item. And that'll be a comma. And on the next row, we're going to invoke the intermediate if function, IIF, parenthesis. And here we're using some conditional statements. The cost is less than 0. Cost is less than 0, then comma. We put the cost and put a comma, and then we have a single quote, a space, a single quote. We put the parenthesis, and we call it as debits. Aha! We're doing an account ledger. You thought you'd escaped accounting, but here, in a very thwarted and twisted and sad and sick conspiracy, Dr. Flint and I have found a way to add accounting into the data administration class. You cannot escape. I'm kidding. Now, we've got that as debits, so that'll be comma. And then we invoke the intermediate if again. And this time it's going to be the cost is equal to, is greater than, or equal to 0. Don't put an O, use a 0. Then it'll be cost, comma, and then we'll put a single quote, a space, another single quote, and those are that single space we're putting in there is a literal. As credits and then we're going to put from SEC 1804 underscore finances. And I fooled all of you. All of you thought I was just some dummy monkey that just copied in code, but I really didn't know this stuff. Ha ha ha, you've been surprised. And then I'm going to put in order by item. Semicolon as we close off. Let's take a look. I'm in the middle of page 686, and this is Access SQL using the intermediate function. We're going to select the item, comma. Then I'm going to have my first intermediate if function invoke a function, and that is if the cost is less than 0, then I'm going to put the cost. Otherwise, I'm going to put in a blank space, and that column will be known as debits. Then here's the second intermediate if. The cost is greater than or equal to 0. I will put in the cost. And then and then the false, remember it's if then, true, false, and what we get if it's true, if it's false, and if it's false, and it's going to be, again, that empty space, and that will be called as credits. And this is from the section 1804 underscore finances table, and we're going to order by item. Let's see what happens. Then this is supposed to be 1804. Let's see what happens. And so we're going to come over here. We're going to click create, query design. Is this off? We'll go to the SQL view and pop it in. Let's run it. And there we are. Let's think about this for a minute And let's see what we'd be looking at. Now, before we do it, let's save it as 18.4. Here we have a ledger, and we're doing them are debits and credits. You say, you people at OBU, you fat business faculty, you're a bunch of sadists. I thought I was through with accounting. Ha ha ha, you thought. Well, let's look at this. We have a ledger. Now, we have a birthday gift from mom, okay? And mom sends us $200. That's a credit. Now, while I have it, she says to me, let's say she gives me a gift card for $200, or she writes me a check for $200. I have a credit. Now, the financial institution upon which it was drawn has a what? It has a debit. That's why they call this the double entry bookkeeping system. And you know who invented it? Well, it's in Western history, we say it was really the Venetians and the Florentinians as they were trading, and they had to keep track of stuff. Not wrong accounting breath. It was the Arabs. They were involved. They had the Silk Road going 5,000 years ago, when all of us folks of Western European stock, we were still climbing around in caves, beating back woolly mammoth animals or whatever. So we have a credit to our name, $200. Then we have a data. Then we have we have a debit. Car repair, $620.98. Then we have a debt repaid by Jim. Now, good old Jim who borrowed $20 from us, I call Jim, go, Jim, I need money. Or we go by Jim's door and force Jim to pay us. Or we say, Jim, if you don't give me the $20, I'm going to post that picture of you at a drunken party on Facebook, and you're not going to get your job at Finley and Cook. Ha ha. So we get the $20. Now we have a credit. Haircut, $22. We pay that out. That's a debit. Well, we go to lunch. And over at McAllister's, it's $15.62. We're living high in the hog. Said, yeah, give me a diet Dr. Pepper. Maybe maybe you got a brownie because you're splurging because mom sent you $200 and you're living high on the hog. And then what are you doing going to the opera? If any of you go to the opera, I want to know. People your age should not be exposed to the opera. I was as a young lad, and look what happened to me. But you go to the opera, and then you have a rent for April, and that's $700. You say, wait, why? Well, I don't understand this. Explain it to me. I will. You paid $700 for rent. You now have $700 of, and it's rent for April, by the way. Why April? Because I wrote the author of this book, and I said, my birthday is April, and my birthday was April 15th. Now, I'm not hinting that I would want many of you to put cards under my door or say, Dr. Harmon, are there any books you would like or anything like that? I'm not making a hint, and I'm not saying that you should feel ashamed of yourselves because you didn't know it was my birthday. I would never do that. However, the rent for April was paid. And since you've paid the rent, and I'm sure that the rent was collected in advance, that means you have a credit. You have, so if you leave on April 15th, which is my birthday, you'll get half of your money back. Well, assuming that you didn't trash the place. And knowing some of you, you won't get a dime. You, in fact, may get sued. I'm just kidding you. You're all nice people. And then you say, okay, it's a credit because I have credit. I've paid in advance for the use of those days. And then a Samsonite suitcase. Every college student needs a Samsonite suitcase. And I guess you've graduated and, well, it's your, I don't know. But yeah, all of you need a Samsonite suitcase, $248.13 debit. And so far, your debits are running far ahead of your credits. Yeah. And there you can see over on the bottom of page 686, the finances table with its, and the finances table is what type of table is it? Is it a production table? Does it show transactions? Oh, it's close. Is it a record table? Voila. It's a record table because it does what? It lists stuff that happened. It's just a list. And we see the Samsonite suitcase, the rent for April, the opera ticket, the lunch, the debt repaid by Jim, the haircut. You had to have that haircut, there's no way you could go to the opera if you didn't go and get your hair colored purple with orange tips. Because any self-respecting person your age would not dare go to the opera unless you had black hair, Ozzy Osbourne style, with some gray and then some purple and some orange tips. How could you possibly not go and look your best? Then we have the result table, and that's what we have. See how we've moved all of we've put this all together. I call this the Dr. Roger Flint query, but you can name it as 18.4. And what we did was we took that beginning table finances and we tore it apart using the intermediate if function. Isn't that dramatic? Well, I think so. Okay. As he walks us through on over here in chapter 18, he again gives us another task where we apply two functions to different parts of the data. Now, I look at the bottom of page 685, and we're going to see the code. And so let's go ahead and write that. And you say, Dr. Harmon, this is too much work. I'm writing all this code and my wrists are tired. Hey, I'm an old person and I'm doing this. You can handle it. So stop whining. I'm kidding. All right. We're going to come down here and put this here, and this will be 18.5. We're going to do select description. Comma. And then on the second line, we're going to invoke the intermediate if, IIF, comma, price is greater than 2.00, comma, price equal 1.05. Here's the good news. The value of the dollar versus all other world currencies has gone up. Here's the bad news. The people in China and Southeast Asia who sell us stuff, in South Korea who sell us stuff pretty cheap because their currency had traded a little bit higher against the dollar, the price just went up for you and me. They've got to get paid more dollars because their currency isn't worth as much. So there's a good and a bad news, isn't there? Life's like that. And so we say the intermediate if function price, and the price is greater than $2 and price is 105. And price Okay, okay. After the $2, then we're going to use the then. Okay, the price is going to tar $2. So we're going to use the price is $2, and then we put price equals 1.05. I was on the right path there. Price times 1.10, and this should be price times 1.05. I apologize. Not equal. And that ends that intermediate if function statement. So we'll put a parenthesis there. And here comes our alias as new price. From L underscore foods, semicolon. Let's look at this. We're going to select the description, comma. We invoke the intermediate if function. The price is greater than $2. This is the if. If the price is greater than $2, then the price, we take price times 105. Otherwise, we take price times 1.10. We're doing the if, then, else. If the condition is met, we take price and multiply it times 1.05. Now there's a 5% increase. The default is price times 1.10. And we're going to use the column alias as new price, and we're going to get that from foods. Create. I'll put this in here. We'll run the query. My mistake here is I should have, let's just get rid of this and go back up here where we can see what we're doing. Or really, you go, I see it, Dr. Harmon, don't you? Smart Alex. You need to magnify it even more. Thanks a lot. All right, we're going to underscore price. That was the problem. We got a parameter error. Okay, now maybe this will run. All right, we'll put that in there. And we'll click run. And there we are. Now, if you look at the bottom of page 688, you're going to see the beginning table. And then this will be 18.5 at the top. Let's say this is 18.5 dash 5. You'll see the result table. Notice something. The fresh salad was greater than $2. So we multiplied it times what? 1.05. Okay. pardon me, the fresh salad was greater than $2. Okay, and if that condition is operant, we take times 1.05. And notice now it's 220. And then the sandwich, it was 350. And now it's 368. Now, you say, okay, what happened here? Let's go back and think about this for just a moment. We had took the description. If it was, and we're going to take the fresh salad. If it's greater than $2, then we're going to take the price times 1.05. Else, it would be 1.10. Now, fresh salad is $2. It's not greater than $2. And this is where your mind can trick you. I've had students go, oh, this doesn't look right. The price is $2. Okay. Since it's $2 and it's not greater than $2, then we up it by 10%. We come down here to the sandwich, which is $3.50. And since it's greater than $2, we take it times 1.05. And that's how we get the result table. And of course, there's our new price. That's the table alias. This is Dr. Hartman. We have alias tables. We have alias columns. Are there a lot of criminals involved with databases? Well, I think the hacking into our systems by the Russians, and I think Bitcoin and ransomware and all kinds of things tell you, yes, there are many, many criminals who are involved in databases. That's a joke. Probably didn't get it, but that's right. Now, over here in page, he talks about parameter queries. And parameter queries simply asks us if we don't input something with a given condition, then we get a result. And he walks us through that using Oracle and defining parameters. Now, he shows us over on page 699, a query and access with two parameters, or a parameter query and access. We're going to do that very first. This is bottom page 699, 698. Many of you didn't know this, but you're masters at writing parameter queries. People will be in class, and they'll go, "This isn't working. It says something about parameters." Trust me, I've been there too. I feel your pain, my friends. I've been there too. So we're gonna work with this, Jewel. And here we go. We're gonna select everything. From L_employees. Those two lines of code always remind me of Lady Liberty. You say, Dr. Harmon, where in your demented mind did you get Lady Liberty? Well, think about it. Think of the world as a table full of people, okay? Countries, ethnicities, language groups, territories, the whole world. And here's Lady Liberty protecting New York City. Why? Because New York City is the home of the New York Yankees, God's baseball team. I'm teasing, I'm just kidding. But There's Lady Liberty. And Lady Liberty says, send me, you're tired, you're poor. I'll even take your rich people on an H-1 visa, or smart people on an H-1 visa. But give me your tired and poor and bring them to me. And if you slip in a few engineers, doctors, and computer programmers, and some other manufacturing specialists, you throw those in too. We'll give them a special visa and then find a way to keep them here. Okay, but we want your tired and your poor. Now, unless you have a substantial amount of Native American blood in you, this is your query. Somewhere, someone in your family said, it's time to go to America. It may have been the debt collectors pounding on your door there in Brunswick, England. It may have been you escaping from the Nazi Germany from the 30s. It may have been your people coming across because the potato crops failed in Ireland. It may be that someone in back your family said, I think that's a great place to have a better life. Let's go. Okay. So I call that the America query, the Lady Liberty query. Select from employees. And then we have always a condition where the department code, underscore code equals, and here's a bracket. I said a bracket, not a racket. This has nothing to do with organized crime or people who delve in magic tricks. Enter a valid department code. And then, boom. All right, so we have 3 lines of code. Select everything from the employees table where the department code equals, and then there's the parameter, enter a valid department code. Well, let's run this, and we'll copy and paste it in. And while we do this, let me ask, how many of you know who Sigfield and Roy are? How many of you have ever heard of Sigfield and Roy? What did they do? So we're going to run our code, and we've got a parameter query. We got a parameter error, but this time we took the error and turned it into something good. This query is a lot like how God deals with us. We were enemies of God before we knew Him. We were sinners by choice and sinners by birth. Paraphrasing one of my old pastors. And then God says, even though, I was at enmity, He loved me so much, He sent His Son, died, validated who Jesus was by raising Him from the dead. So now I enter parameter value. The great parameter value of all time will be those whose name is in the book of life, those whose name is in the database of life. I'll modernize it, versus those whose name is not. And when they run that query and it says enter parameter query, you have to put in a valid department code. And I don't know, let's try accounting. And it gives us nothing, because if I don't know if I don't know the valid codes, and the valid department code was SAL. So let's save this. Well, let's put in a department code, and I'm going to put in Sal. I put in SLA. Let's just go back down to the SQL view. And I'm put in and I want to go, I'm going to put in the salary. Department code is this AL. And we get hire dates and all kinds of things. Can't save the record this time. So we're going to go back, and this is going to be 18.6. So I want to write my code again. Let's go back up here. And from the foods table, where did I get from L Foods? All right. All right, let's try this again. That was my mistake. I didn't know the appropriate department name. Why? Because I'm a hacker. You said this looks like something you do with passwords. Voila. You're right. And we're going to enter in a department code, and that will be SAL for sales. Click OK. And there's our result set because we need the parameters. So we're going to save this as 18.6. All right. Now the author, as he likes to do, talks about a query and access with two parameters, not one, but two. We looked down upon the code and we saw that there was a parameter query, and we realized that parameter query needs a companion. And so from the rib of one parameter query, we'll make another. So we're going to do that. And this will be query 18.7. And so we'll go back here to our notepad. And we will put select. I'm in the page 700. And from the L underscore employees table, you wonder, do you ever think these tables get tired of being queried? Do you think the table sits down there in the bottom of the computer and goes, I am so tired of this. They keep asking me the same stupid question over and over and over. They're like a 3-year-old. They just, all they can ever do is say, why? And they just keep answering me. Do you ever wonder about that? When queries go home at night, yeah, that's a job. They're in the computer. Then they go to query land, and they, you know, and Mr. and Mrs. Query, if you guys say, I'm so tired of these human beings. They just keep asking these stupid questions. They run the same one every month, and nothing's really any better. I don't know. I've thought about writing a play about it. Maybe I will. Maybe I won't. Where hire underscore date, and we're going to invoke another function between, and then we'll do our bracket, and this is the prompt, enter beginning date. Now these are rude parameters, because rather than saying please enter the date, let's improve them. We're a Christian school and we love people, so let's be nicer with our queries. So let's put please enter beginning date. And and then we'll have the bracket. And then we invoke and then we invoke the and clause, and then we have their bracket. Please enter ending date. And we could also put then thanks in advance for your help on each of these, okay? Just to make the queries a little nicer, okay? As you've heard, you attract more flies with honey than you do with vinegar, unless the vinegar is full of Johnny Walker Red, and then the flies will probably come. But that's for another class. So we're going to select from employees where the hired underscore date is between, and we put please enter the beginning date and please enter the ending date. And then we're going to order by hire underscore date. Let's see if we got it. I call this the nice parameters. Nice parameter. So we're going to click create, query design. We'll close it off. SQL. Boom. And we'll run it. Now, please enter a beginning date. Isn't that much more civilized and just kind? And I'm going to try 6/1/1998. Let's see what will happen. Okay, and the ending date will be, I'm going to try April 1, 2008. And he said, Dr. Harmon, this looks suspiciously like you would need to know the beginning and the ending dates. Yes, just like you have to know your username and your password. And you thought. Now, people who hack those have a way to come in and check and run through every kind of possible combination. Or they get you to just simply give you your password and your username by sending a phishing email. And the next thing you know, your emails are on the New York Times. And you've got candidate Trump going, tell the Russians to give them the other 30,000 emails. That doesn't do very well, do I? All righty. Please enter the ending. So he said, please give us the beginning date. And we could have added, thank you in advance for you. Well, let's do that. If we're going to do this, let's do it right. Well, I'll put okay here. Okay. And I'm going to go down to the SQL. And there in the beginning date, let's just put, well, nah, we don't have to, but you could go into the parameter and put thank you in advance for your cooperation. And then please enter the ending date. Thank you in advance for your cooperation. So this is just being nice. This is a query about being nice as much as running a parameter query. Now, we didn't get anything because we didn't put anything in. So I'm going to go back down to the SQL view, and I'm going to run it, and we're going to put in our beginning date again of 6/1/1998. Now again, let me say this to all of you. I'm not really hurt or upset that none of you remembered my birthday and put cards and stuff under my thing. Or said, Dr. Harmon, would you like to go to lunch with us? I'm kidding you. I'm truly kidding you. And we'll click OK. Because if you ask me to lunch, I won't go with you. That was a very snotty thing to say. Yeah, I was playing around. Okay. So we call this here query 18.6. I don't want to call it 18.6. Let's call it please be kind. I know and now there's one off Dr. Reader's door that I like. It's called JBN. Just be nice. And we'll call it that. The remainder of this chapter deals with subqueries, okay? And I'm going to see if he's got these for us. And that's supposed to be 1812. Here's a fun fact. The history of the United States. Did you know the only country to whom we have lost a war was Canada, of all places? Yes, we're at war with Canada for one moment. Now here's 1812, and you say, okay, where's the subquery? The subquery, as he shows you at the bottom, page 701, is that highlighted area. Notice what we're doing. We're going to select, field, and then we identify the table where the price is less than, and then we run the subquery. That's what's inside the parentheses, and we order by description. This lets us nest queries to a finer cut of the data. And on this one, this is going to be a cut and paste job. But again, the subquery, he shows you. And then he's going to walk us using different conditions to do the subqueries. Why was he show us subqueries? Because like me, he's interested in submarines. That's not true. It's called a subquery because it's a subordinate query. We're running a query, but this one's nested into the larger one, so it's subordinate. And we'll run that, and there we are. So we got the price, the foods, we got them from the foods table, which we had identified A, and where the price was less than, and we selected the average price, B dot price, from foods B. So we used foods. Here we used an alias for foods, alias A, and then for foods we used alias B, and we ordered it by description. And that one, my friends, is query. We're going to call that 1812. Instead of that, let's call it the Andrew Jackson. Why? In honor of his great victory at the Battle of New Orleans. And you go out on the internet and look for it, the song, the Battle of New Orleans. You'll find it. And it tells the Battle of New Orleans where we fought the British. Now, here's the unfortunate thing. The War of 18 had already been ended, and the armistice had been signed. However, in 1812, news traveled slow. There was no internet. What? There was no Facebook. What? So Andrew Jackson didn't tweet, whoop the British. Time for Mardi Gras. Nope, didn't happen. So I'm going to call this the Andrew Jackson query. All right, my friends. And it even begins over on page 702 to walk us through that. I'm looking for anything else here that I think that's going to really there on the bottom, page 701. I don't think it's necessary to run it. You can see it. he uses the end condition for a query. And he uses that in. It's either in or it's not in. So we find anything that's in a list, or we can use the not in. It's kind of like a little search. And I just don't see the, then we have another, then we have a subquery where we say it's not in, as you would, subqueries that result in a single value. And he talks about not in it as well, and nulls, subqueries in an update. And those are over on page 710, 711. And no, it's not time to go to the local 7-Eleven to see if they'll sell you beer illegally. Correlated subqueries. Everything you'd need to know about subqueries. Now, I would say this: if you want to get a more value than we've got, go ahead and you can run through those subqueries. But the truth is, you can probably read them and see the results set in the beginning table and get as much as if you just run the query. And we've covered a lot of ground. So we've come to the point now where we're using table aliases. We're using column aliases. We're using subqueries. We're using intermediate if statements. We're using search statements, the in or not in. And then he incorporates that using the joins. And that pretty much does chapter 18. So I'm going to close this off. And I have my SQL fun Harmon 18. And I'm going to upload that file. I'm going to come over here to the files section. And I'm going to do the upload. I'm going to do my desktop. And I'm going to find sub SQL fun Harmon Keith 18. There's D16, LD16. There we are, LD18. I'll open it. And it's thinking. And let's go down and see if it's here. There's one from February to Harmon. And we're looking for April 18th at 10:33 p.m. We're good to go. So I did upload it. That's what you'll use for chapter 18, for Lunch's database 18. Well, my friends, we've covered much ground and we've gone a long ways. So I'm going to stop the share and call Sonny. I can't, he's dead. It's a bad joke. Sonny and Sherry, probably don't know who they are. And we'll click share screen. Stop the share, and we'll